happens. During that state of suspended animation, we know as hibernation. And the world's super hibernator is undoubtedly this fearsome-looking predator, the black bear. Also known as the American black bear, though they can be found in large numbers across the border in Canada as well. American or Canadian, it doesn't matter. In any case, the black bear hibernates 5 to 7 months of the year, during which time it does not eat, drink, urinate, or defecate. During this period, they completely throw all their other circadian rhythms out the window. As they move from summer to autumn, black bears, and indeed bears in general, begin feeding even more than usual. Males and females will gorge themselves on an average of 30,000 calories a day. We don't advise that you try this at home. This conspicuous consumption is all for a reason. It creates a layer of fat which will act as insulation and kind of a metabolic reservoir for their time in super hibernation. Now, chipmunks are, of course, hibernators too, so let's compare what they get up to with the habits of the black bear. When the chipmunk goes into a deep sleep, its body temperature can drop by more than 6.6 degrees Celsius. The upshot is that the chipmunk must wake up every few days and feed, like nobody's business. The metabolism of a black bear, on the other paw, will slow to where they are taking just 1 or 2 breaths per minute, and their hearts beat 8 to 12 times per minute. But this is not a competition. And there's no doubt that many small mammals, such as chipmunks but also woodchucks and ground squirrels, are some world-class hibernators. The hibernation habits of the Arctic ground squirrel are surely worthy of note. A year-round resident of the Arctic tundra, this ground squirrel has a hibernation period of up to 7 to 8 months. During its deep sleep, the Arctic ground squirrel's core body temperature drops just below freezing. Once every 2 to 3 weeks or so, it shivers and shakes without waking for more than a dozen hours at a time to reheat its body. Another way in which animals have the sense to register changes in seasons is by changing into their winter wardrobes. The Arctic fox is a classic case in point. Life can be difficult for this elegant-looking little creature, but the Arctic fox makes the best of its lot, preying on whatever creatures it can find for survival, including lemons and voles, and perhaps, to make life on the tundra a little less solitary of a journey, the Arctic fox is a monogamous creature and mates for life. They're also relatively involved parents, with mother and father helping to raise the average of 5 to 8 cubs. Be that as it may, let's get back to the Arctic fox's fashion sense. During the short Arctic summer, its fur is a brown color. As winter sets in, the fur thickens and turns white, thicker for obvious reasons. White so that the creature's camouflage matches the season, and that of course means white as snow. Animals' body clocks can last longer than a day, or a season, or even a whole year. To illustrate, we leave the frozen tundra of the Arctic behind and travel to the deciduous forests of the eastern United States, the principal habitat of the periodical cicadas, also known as magicicadas. Cicadas spend a lot of time underground. In fact, the vast majority of their lives. For a period of either 13 or 17 years, both prime numbers you will note, cicadas stay underfoot, feeding on the roots of deciduous trees, and yet, slowly, ever so slowly over this time, they develop and mature. Then, finally, for a bit of few glorious weeks, when the almost adult cicadas are at the so-called nymph stage, they emerge from the ground in large numbers. They shed their skins one last time, and after a few days, their exoskeletons harden completely. Then they take to the skies, singing the familiar cicada mating call to find a mate. The question is, after every 13 or 17 years, how do they know when to come out in such precise intervals? Recent research thinks they may be keeping track of the sap cycles in trees, but still, no one knows for sure. One thing we haven't really touched on in our examination of animal timing is the effect of the moon on animals. For the lunar cycle governs the timing of natural events as much as the sun. A long way from cicadas, at the edge of the ocean in this case, the coral reefs around the Gold Coast of Australia. We can see clearly how life is affected by the lunar cycle, especially in underwater life. For just 1 week of every year, in spring, after a full moon, millions of corals will release their eggs and sperm in a symphony of reproductive activity. This spectacular example of group sex, which is what it is if you think about it, has long been a source of fascination. But up until less than a decade ago, it was a mystery how these seemingly primitive beings, which somehow get through life without brains or eyes, synchronize their annual mass spawning. But in 2007, scientists were able to isolate an ancient gene in the corals, which is capable of detecting moonlight. On Animal Super Senses, every episode serves to demonstrate that while we like to think of ourselves at the top of the food chain, when we look at our senses compared to the phenomenal abilities of other animals, we are just fumbling in the dark with earmuffs on. See you next time on Animal Super Senses.